Hi, Piggy. Thank you for joining. I'm doing shout outs today. Let me know if you want me to shout you out and write your name in the chat. Hello, welcome. I'm doing shout outs. Let me know if you want me to shout you out. Write your name in the chat. Hi, Millie. Shout out to Lucy. Thank you for subscribing, MCM. Piggy, put your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Sometimes if you don't write your name, then I don't know if you want me to shout you out or not. I know, Piggy. Thank you so much. I'll put your name first in the next page. Shout out to Ben. Shout out to Daniel. Shout out to Malia. Shout out to Mary. Shout out to Scarlett. Shout out to Jaden. Shout out to Luna. Shout out to Isabella. Shout out to Emmanuel. Shout out to Valeska. Write your name in the chat if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Adelaide. Shout out to Yanis. Shout out to Channing. Shout out to Bella. Shout out to McAdam. Shout out to Elise. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Mona. Shout out to Liam. Shout out to Jillian. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Alicia. Shout out to Priscilla. Shout out to Malin. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Aubrey. Shout out to Maggie. Shout out to Evelyn. Shout out to Vanessa. Shout out to Bailey. Shout out to Rennie. Shout out to Mail. Shout out to Jagger. Shout out to Mackenzie. Shout out to Kaden. Shout out to Tahahasna. Shout out to Henley. Shout out to Wilson. Shout out to Bridget. Shout out to Gentry. Shout out to Melody. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. Leave a like if you like these live streams and the shout outs. Thank you for being here. Shout out to Piggy. Shout out to Shout out to Aria. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Sadie. Shout out to Abigail. Shout out to Addie. Shout out to Jacob. Shout out to Emma. Shout out to Sammy. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Hunter. Shout out to Malia. Shout out to Maeve. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Shout out to Ellie. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Mark. Shout out to Brayden. Shout out to Michaela. Shout out to Lila. Shout out to Willow. Shout out to Callie. Shout out to Leibu. Shout out to Teresa. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Navaya. Shout out to Miley. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Prince. Shout out to Tasha. Shout out to Mackenzie. Shout out to Chanel. Shout out to Nyla. Shout out to Scarlett. Shout out to Dorothy. Shout out to Navy. Shout out to Lonnie, or Lainey, sorry. Shout out to Haley. Shout out to Mussy. Shout out to Aubrey. Shout out to Caden. Shout out to Manon. Shout out to Lainey or Lonnie. Shout out to Ayika. Shout out to Yaren. Shout out to Hazel. Shout out to Gretel. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. If you like these shout outs, give this live stream a thumbs up. Thank you for being here. Shout out to Sophie. Shout out to Kylon. Shout out to Lyra. Shout out to Gabriella. Shout out to LB. Shout out to Tessel. Shout out to Yusra. Shout out to Madison. Shout out to Zev. Shout out to Eric. Shout out to Lisette. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Mila. Shout out to Bailey. Shout out to Bryn. Shout out to Harper. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Noah. Shout out to Terry. Shout out to Lizzie. Shout out to Joseph. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Jasper. Oh, wrong color. Shout out to Bree. Shout out to Zoe. Shout out to Veselilani. Shout out to Blair. Shout out to Alyssa. Shout out to Haley. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Lilia. Happy early birthday. Shout out to Brielle. Shout out to Reese. Shout out to Elle. Shout out to Julia. Shout out to Emmy. Shout out to Jessica. Shout out to Zuleni. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Chase. Shout out to Araya. Shout out to Zara. Shout out to Jennifer. Shout out to Zoe. Shout out to these people. Okay, on to the next page. Thank you for being here. If you are enjoying the shout outs, give it a like. Thank you for your support. Shout out to Jada. Shout out to Maya. Shout out to Zayden. Shout out to Lucy. Shout out to Antonella. Shout out to Zia. Shout out to Janice. Shout out to Casey. Shout out to Emma. Shout out to Robin. Shout out to Alexander. Shout out to Aiden. Shout out to May. Shout out to Mussy. Shout out to Claire. Shout out to Joshua. Shout out to Brandon. Shout out to Helen. Shout out to Janice. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Bliss. Shout out to Alina. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Kate. Shout out to Thomas. Shout out to Darwin. Oops, I messed up a little bit. Let me redo that one. Shout out to Darwin. Shout out to Nellie. Shout out to Marge. Shout out to Brooklyn. Shout out to Piper. Shout out to Mika. Shout out to Morgan. Shout out to Summer. Shout out to Leanne. Shout out to Kaylin. Shout out to Gumball. Shout out to Demi. Shout out to Layla. Shout out to Karen. Shout out to Minnie. Shout out to Benjamin. Shout out to Victor. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. If you are enjoying the live stream, give it a thumbs up. I hope we can reach 100 likes. Thank you so much for being here. Shout out to Ava Salmon. Shout out to Willow. Shout out to Estelle. Shout out to Ashley. Shout out to Zadie. Shout out to Liberty. Shout out to Courtney. Shout out to Poppy. Shout out to Bastani. Shout out to Malaysia. Shout out to Izzy. Shout out to Ryan. Shout out to Selena. Shout out to Raina. Shout out to Ben. Shout out to Leo. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Ronaldo. Shout out to Trey. Shout out to Aisha. Shout out to Flora. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Cameron. Oh no. Cameron, can you put your name again? Sorry. Cameron. Shout out to Cameron. Thank you. Shout out to Shiley. Shout out to Yair. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Riker. Shout out to Soraya. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Kristen. Shout out to Landon. Shout out to Max. Shout out to Araya. Shout out to Emmy. Shout out to Zyra. Shout out to Prish. Shout out to Logan. Shout out to Jimena. Shout out to Safa. Shout out to Hillary. Shout out to Sana. Shout out to Kaden. Shout out to Lydia. Shout out to Gojo. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. If you like the live stream, give it a like, give it a thumbs up. Thank you for being here. If you want me to shout you out, write your name in the chat. If I haven't gotten to your name, then write your name again. I'm so sorry if I miss your name. It's because sometimes the chat goes really fast. So I don't do it on purpose, okay? Just know that. Shout out to Tammy. Shout out to Kenya. Shout out to Valentina. Shout out to Wolf. Shout out to Penelope. Shout out to Ben Dover. Shout out to Reese. Shout out to Isabella. Shout out to Levi. Shout out to Bray. Shout out to Elise. Shout out to Nora. Shout out to Evie. Shout out to Joanna. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Lucy. Shout out to Giselle. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Daniel. Shout out to Amelia. Shout out to Sophia Flores. Shout out to Harper. Shout out to Jules. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Meadow. Shout out to Rylan. Shout out to Marilyn. Shout out to Ariana. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Kaylee. Shout out to William. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Kaden. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Eviana. Shout out to May. Shout out to Hannah. Shout out to Alexis. Shout out to Hosna. Shout out to Jury. Shout out to Leslie. Shout out to Juliana. Shout out to Sunny. Shout out to Jordan. Shout out to Peanut. Shout out to Christina. Shout out to Melissa. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. If you like the shout outs, give this live stream a like. Maybe we can get to 200 likes. Thank you for being here. Shout out to Han. Shout out to Shayla. Shout out to Stevie. Shout out to Hazel. Shout out to Darcy. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Gigi. Shout out to Delilah. Shout out to Addis. Shout out to Phoebe. Shout out to Kinsley. Shout out to Mina. Shout out to Jordan. Shout out to Cora. Shout out to Martha. Shout out to Mira. Shout out to Vivi. Shout out to Peyton. Shout out to, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Deja. Shout out to Denver. Shout out to Ezekiel. Oops. Shout out to Nora. Shout out to Stephanie. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Destiny. Shout out to Counter. Shout out to Ward. Shout out to Isla. Thank you for subscribing. Wait, can you spell your name again? Isla? I don't know if I spelled it right. Shout out to Nova. Shout out to Bean. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Charlotte. Shout out to Belle. Shout out to Trisha. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Lay. Shout out to Ingrid. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Lay. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Arya. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Hawaiian Princess. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Eden. Shout out to Savannah. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Bo. Shout out to Macy. Thank you for subscribing. Okay. Shout out to this page, to these people. On to the next page. If you like this live stream, give it a thumbs up. Thank you for being here. If you want a shout out, put your name in the chat. Wait, this doesn't work. Hold on. Shout out to Darcy. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Bobby. Shout out to Abby. Shout out to Bray. Shout out to CJ. Shout out to Cecilia. Shout out to Stormy. Oh no, I messed up. I put Story. Shout out to Stormy. Shout out to Alexia. Shout out to Lay. Shout out to Rebecca. Shout out to Heaven. Shout out to Ariel. Shout out to MJ. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Fun. Shout out to Brenna. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Callie. Shout out to Amari. Shout out to Jasper. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Jaylani. Shout out to Charlotte. Shout out to Jojo. Shout out to Kate. Shout out to Presley. Shout out to Haven. Shout out to Samira. Shout out to Lauren. Shout out to Rinty. Shout out to Ashanti. Shout out to Ingrid. Shout out to Wendy. Shout out to Carter. Shout out to Sky. Shout out to Davin or Davin. Shout out to Sophia. Shout out to Sienna. Shout out to Andrea. Shout out to Dina. Shout out to Lay. Shout out to Grace. Shout out to these people. on to the next page. We're almost at 200 likes. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Shout out to Ramon. Shout out to Haxon. Shout out to Kalan. Shout out to Aria. Shout out to Miranda. Shout out to Samari. Shout out to Preston. Shout out to Payson. Shout out to Rafaela. Shout out to Callie. Shout out to Olivia. Shout out to Kira. Shout out to Delaney. Shout out to Yanni. Shout out to Zyla. Shout out to Grayson. If I haven't gotten your name, write it again. The chat goes by fast. I'm so sorry. Shout out to Malia. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Jojo. Shout out to Ella. Shout out to Faith. Shout out to Araya. Shout out to Braylee. Shout out to Olivia. Shout out to Jazz Mariah. Shout out to L'Oreal. Shout out to Addison. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Jasmine. Shout out to Chanena. Shout out to Kayan. Shout out to Faith. Shout out to Jerome. Shout out to Cat's Eye. Shout out to Sammy. Shout out to Jami. Shout out to Erica. Shout out to Anaya. Shout out to Julia. Shout out to Noor. Shout out to Molly. Shout out to Kel. Shout out to Darlene. Shout out to Ingrid. Okay. Shout out to these people. Thank you for being here. Give it a like if you are enjoying this live stream. Comment your name if you want me to shout you out. Comment your name in the chat box. Thank you for being here. Comment your name if you want me to shout you out. Shout out to Callie. Shout out to Jonas. Shout out to Izzy. Shout out to Giselle. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Macy. Shout out to Rachel. Shout out to Blanca. Shout out to Megumi. Shout out to Hannah. Shout out to Aria. Thank you for subscribing. Shout out to Caitlin. Shout out to Zoe. Shout out to Taylor. Thank you for subscribing. Oh, I messed up. This marker is too inky. I'll put that one to the side. Shout out to Victoria. Shout out to Gwen. Shout out to Tegan. Shout out to Nolan. Shout out to Isabella. Shout out to Haley. Shout out to David. Shout out to Honeybean. Shout out to Anya. Shout out to Traylon. Traylon. Shout out to Lily. Shout out to Ivaya. Shout out to Lila. Shout out to Jalen. Okay, there we go. I think the live stream froze for a little bit. Shout out to Maya. Shout out to... Oh, I think it froze again. Did it freeze again? I'm not sure. Shout out to Megan. Shout out to Catherine. Shout out to Michael. Shout out to Blaine. Shout out to Dwayne. Shout out to Dua. Shout out to Noel. Shout out to Caden. Shout out to Richard. Shout out to Taurus. Shout out to these people. On to the next page. If you liked the live stream, give it a thumbs up. Thank you for being here. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Give me like 20 seconds. Okay, I'm back. Thank you for your patience. Shout out to Latoya. Shout out to Aria. Shout out to Logan. Shout out to Catherine. Shout out to Zoe. Oh, sorry. Shout out to Emilio. Shout out to Molly. Shout out to Jenna. Shout out to Brittany. Shout out to Jenna. Shout out to April. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Mikey. Shout out to Abby. Shout out to Mike. Shout out to Anirban. Shout out to Araya. Alan. Shout out to Ingrid. Shout out to Gael. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Adaria. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Kenzie. Shout out to Michael. Shout out to Anna Clara. Shout out to Karis. Shout out to Evelyn. Shout out to Rosalie Morris. Shout out to Brielle. Shout out to Emberlyn. Shout out to Aria D. Shout out to Landon. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Jace. Shout out to Lalo. Shout out to Laura. Shout out to Vilma. Shout out to Shinad. Shout out to Riker. Shout out to Gurnaz. Shout out to Erilyn. Shout out to Grace. Shout out to these people. Thank you for being here. On to the next page. If you like my live stream, give it a thumbs up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Shout out to Claire. Shout out to Teresa. Shout out to Eleni. Shout out to Pickford. Shout out to Yeyi. Shout out to Kailani. Shout out to Allison. Shout out to Myra. Shout out to Noelle. Shout out to Journey. Shout out to Eliza. Shout out to Porvi. Shout out to Arian. Shout out to Kaya. Shout out to Samantha. Shout out to Rosie. Shout out to Jessica. Actually, shout out to Lily. Shout out to Deja. Shout out to Jelena. Shout out to Kaden. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Ivan. Shout out to Giselle. Shout out to Luna. Shout out to Jessica. Shout out to Clara. Shout out to Marley. Shout out to Corey. Shout out to Deva. Shout out to Aurora. Shout out to Emily. Shout out to Yuli. Shout out to Oscar. Shout out to Amaya. Shout out to Holly. Shout out to Millie. Shout out to Juliana. Shout out to Parmis. Shout out to Jessie. Shout out to Arietta. Shout out to Ava. Shout out to Nevaya. Shout out to Nicholas. And shout out to Sam. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Have a great day or a great night. Thank you for being here.